So, we had a new Mario game this year, a remake of the original PS1 Crash Bandicoot trilogy, two new Sonic games, and is that Bubsy? Seriously, what year is it? Where am I? Of course, as you probably saw when you clicked this video, we're going to talk about Sonic Forces. Yep, already. I actually had a different Is It Worth the Hate video being worked on, but this game popped up and got some pretty nasty reviews, so I thought I'd state my thoughts on it while the game was still fresh. Rest assured, I'm still working on the other video. But I figured now was a good time to give my unbiased thoughts on the game. Then again, this is me we're talking about, and I'm the slightest bit biased toward the Hedgehog, and occasionally even try to defend some of the worst games. No, not that one. Not gonna defend that one. No, not that one either. Oh, I'll get to you next time. Dude, get the frick out of here! So, do I think DeviantArt the video game, Sonic Forces is worth the hate? Right off the bat, you can see the game is silky smooth, and the load times are so refreshingly short for a modern Sonic game. I won't go into detail on the story so as to avoid spoilers for you guys, because I'm awesome like that, though I will spoil a tiny part of the early game. After a rather unsettling opening sequence showing a particularly serious Eggman, the game begins simply enough in Green Hill Zone, as many of the games do. But surprisingly, the classic theme isn't there. In fact, most of the music in the game seems to be new, based off the game's leitmotif. Did I say that right? Fist bump. I am actually okay with this. After Sonic arrives to save the day from Eggman, he proceeds to get his ass handed to him by a new villain named Infinite. And he seemingly dies. No, seriously, the dialogue keeps suggesting that Infinite killed Sonic. Well, that's a heck of a way to start the game. Of course, Sonic is still alive and just being tortured for the next 6 months. Are we sure this is a Sonic game? That seems kind of dark for a Sonic game. Right, the story. So for the last 6 months, Eggman's taken over the world, wiping out entire groups left and right, and leaving only a small rebellion left. Is this Sonic Sat AM? This sounds like Sonic Sat AM. In Sonic's absence, Knuckles has formed a resistance force.
Oh no!
With the recurring cast. Meanwhile, Tails is trying to repair Omega, who got booped off screen in the DLC, which I'll get to later. At this point, the plot from Sonic Mania kicks in and Classic Sonic appears. And truth be told, he's just kinda there. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy to see Classic Sonic, but he really does feel like he's just here for funsies.
You're that Sonic from another dimension, aren't you?
Speaking of the different Sonics, Modern Sonic is the first of 3 playable characters in this game. And rather surprisingly, what I'd say is the worst part of the game. He's not bad by any means. The controls are pretty responsive and the frame rate doesn't crack the bed like a certain other Sonic game. Yes, you. Modern Sonic has never felt more responsive since going into the boost to win style. Now, admittedly, I don't use the boost that much in these games. This might just be because I don't like to use it in the post-Unleashed games, but when I did use it, I felt more in control of him than ever. Unfortunately, his double jump doesn't seem to always work right, and sometimes it feels like he doesn't get enough air from it. And unfortunately, the homing attack at times doesn't seem to quite target right, usually when I was going for a side path. I don't know if this was by design or an oversight. Also, can we just talk about the control in general for a moment? We have D-pad control! Now you're probably like, ew, who uses D-pad in a Sonic game anymore? But it's a nice thing to have during the 2D sections, or any time Sonic moves automatically. The analog stick does just fine, but this is a nice little addition. It was actually a huge gripe I had with Sonic Unleashed, and admittedly I don't remember if Generations had the issue or not. Now granted, this is my experience based off the PS4 version. I've heard some of the other versions, particularly the Switch port, have performance issues, but on PS4 the game feels great. However, almost immediately, one of the game's most major flaws appears. The stages are very linear, even as far as modern Sonic games go. Whoops, wrong game! It doesn't help that most of the stages are pretty short either. Very few of them make it more than 3 minutes, if that much, excluding maybe a boss or two. The second playable character is, of course, Classic Sonic. While he's not as perfect as his Mania incarnation, Classic Sonic feels better here than he did in Generations by a wide margin, mostly due to no longer being so floaty. The downside is, his jumps are maybe just a little bit too weighty, which is kind of funny, seeing as how he seems to be able to jump further than I give him credit for. His spin dash can also be a little bit cranky at times, but it's still an improvement. And his drop dash is more useful here than it was in Mania. Probably has the most open of the stages, and is plenty of fun to play as. But as I said before, he feels shoehorned in. He doesn't really do much story-wise, although his interactions with Tails are pretty funny, mostly due to him still being mute. He just kind of does that adorable head bob while Tails talks about how, in the absence of a Sonic, here's a Sonic to restore balance, or some silly shit like that. Classic Sonic also has a few short moments underwater, which aren't terrible spots, thankfully, although he does start to drown way too quickly. On the other hand, that's likely for balance, as you're not underwater long, and the stages are so tiny. And then we have the third playable character, your own. Yeah, you get a custom character, which I actually thought I'd hate for sure, or at least not give a crap about. I thought they'd be cheaply shoed in, and that the customization process would be mediocre. Despite the fact that I usually adore being able to make my own custom characters in games, I legitimately was sure the custom character in this wasn't going to be my type of thing. That was more for the, let's call them, eccentric part of the fan base, not for somebody like me. I am very happy to say I was so wrong. You're given a fairly diverse number of races with their own unique passives. Stuff like getting pickups from further distance or a double jump, or even starting out with rings when you die. Then you have a handful of custom appearance options and a huge amount of unlockable outfits and clothing. You can also slightly customize your weapon, the Wispon, which is a reference to Sonic Colors, and the various pickups that affect your weapon type are based off of the wisps from Colors. I personally like the electric whip type because, well, whips are badass. Also, because then you can use sort of the lightspeed dash when you have the right type of wisp. It feels less gimmicky than it sounds, and more rewarding depending on your choice, adding to the diversity of the game. Your avatar is probably the most fun character to play as, even if his or her stages are more linear than classic Sonic's, though they're more open than modern Sonic, thanks to their diversity and their fairly fleshed out gameplay. I will say there is an odd case where a wall jump mechanic is introduced extremely late in the game, and I actually missed the tutorial for it about 3 times, because I had been using the lightspeed dash up until a point where it was necessary to use the wall jump, having missed the hint marker that teaches you it. Minor gripe, but a gripe just the same. On some stages, you also get to play as your avatar teamed up with Sonic. These are my absolute favorite stages. While they're still quite linear, they feel like epic set pieces. In a moment of sheer dorkery badass, whenever you team up with Sonic, there's at least one point where you'll do a double boost. Sadly, these are scripted instead of controlled by the player, but goddamn, these sequences are so satisfying. It reminds me of the whole
real superpower of teamwork
bit from Sonic Heroes, but somehow both more and less cheesy at the same time. And it plays fist bump when you do it, which, I'm not gonna lie, touched my nerdy heart just a little. Plus, there's an awesome stage where fist bump plays the rest of the stage after you use a double boost at the start. As for the story is dumb. It's Sonic dumb, though, and surprisingly unexpected from a typical Sonic plot. There's no Chaos Emeralds for one, and Infinite is kind of a fun villain, with some legitimately creepy threats, courtesy of voice actor Liam O'Brien. Hope I said that right. It's not deep or particularly smart, but it fits the game and it's really charming. Also smug. My goodness, Sonic is pure smug in this game. Ultimately, my biggest gripes come from this. The game is so short and so easy. Despite having a whopping 30 stages, they are, as I previously stated, fairly minuscule. Many barely clock in at 2.5 minutes. The payoff is that they're all fairly polished, and the stages are undoubtedly a speedrunner's dream, being quick bite-sized stages instead of gigantic behemoths taking 30 plus minutes. Hate you so much! Unfortunately, it's also baby mode easy, even on hard difficulty. Yeah, it has difficulty modes, but they don't amount to much. On normal, you only lose some of your rings when damaged, but can only carry 100. On hard, you lose all of them, but you can carry as many as you like. Ignore the names, it's more like very easy and easy. Speaking of easy, the game has done away with the live system. And I can't say I dislike this concept. The stages are so short that you barely lose any progress, and it'd likely just serve to annoy the player if they got sent back to the title screen or something. You don't lose your current score when you die anymore, but you do get considerable score bonuses for fewer or no deaths. Now, don't take this as me saying Sonic should never have lives anymore. For a game with levels so small you could stuff them in your pocket, it's fine. But for something like Sonic Mania, I'm glad it still had it, even if I managed to avoid getting a game over during my time with the game. Next are the bosses. These are probably the most challenging part of the game, but most of them are still pretty cake. They don't have a ton of diversity either, with only a few standouts. They basically wind up being slap the bombs back at the boss, or smack the crap out of the boss, or chase the boss until you can mash the homing attack. This works well enough, but it would have been nice to have a few more, or at least some with more variety. None of them are bad per se, but it's a far cry from Sonic Mania's clever boss battles. Then again, while none of them are as memorable as, say, Perfect Chaos, they're mercifully never as irritating as the Time Eater from Generations. There's not a lot in the way of side content either, at least that I've found. There's a few side missions, the returning red rings, which I don't think do much of anything and are just basically for bragging rights, maybe some new gear, and the SOS missions, which have you redoing various stages. These wind up being rescue missions where you have to find the captured character, which I've yet to succeed at, complete the stage as another person's avatar, or replay the stage with the ability to switch between yours and another person's avatar. There's also avatar rentals, which allow you to use someone else's character at will. Speaking of avatars, after you beat the game, you're able to create more characters, so if you feel like you might have missed out, don't worry, you can try them all. In terms of visuals, the game runs smoothly at a superb 60 frames per second without a ton of drops, at least not that I could notice. Unless you're playing on the Switch, which I'm told has frequent frame drops, even though it's supposed to be locked at 30 frames per second. I have heard conflicting reports on this, however. The graphics themselves look fantastic. The locations have a decent amount of diversity. Even when you're in the same basic areas, you'll often go through different parts of the same region, similar to Sonic Adventure 2. The character models look absolutely great, with just the right amount of exaggeration to their movements to make it look cartoonish, without looking silly. And of course, the music is great as expected. The voice acting is a bit hit or miss. It's mostly okay, but sometimes some of the voice actors seem to slip out of character, particularly Shadow, who sounds great in some lines while half asleep in others. As previously stated, Liam O'Brien does a great job as Infinite. Mike Pollock's Eggman is at the absolute top of his game. Quentin Flynn Silver is surprisingly good, and I've always greatly enjoyed Roger Craig Smith's snarky Sonic. The sound is full of your expected trademark audio, complete with the classic bloops and blevins as classic Sonic. And it's also nice they carried over some of the quirks from the previous generation of Sonic titles, such as the audio blurring out when you're boosting, or it being muffled in the rare cases where you're underwater. Last but not least, Episode Shadow. This DLC pack acts as a prequel to the main plot and allows you to play as Shadow, even on a few normal stages in the main game after completion of the DLC, it seems. Shadow himself plays basically the same as Sonic, except that he sort of flies when boosting in the air, and he auto-chains his homing attack. The 3 stages in the DLC are just basically harder versions of a few levels from the main game. They're alright, although I think the third stage gets a little bit obnoxious with its obstacles. The DLC is not worth money in the long run. Luckily, it's free, at least right now, so you may as well get it. At the end of the day, I find myself disagreeing with a lot of the critics who gave it 5 or lower. The game isn't top tier or anything, but it's fun. It's a good game. It doesn't reach being great, though. It winds up being too short, too easy, and way too linear. There's better Sonic games for sure, but there's also much, much worse titles. I'd say it's nowhere near as good as Generations overall, but I had fun with it personally. I absolutely state this game as recommended, but wait until the price comes down. Even though it's only a modest $40, wait until it's at least $30, preferably $20. It's definitely worth playing, but it's so light on content that I can't in good conscience tell someone to pay full price for it. Even though I paid full price. I have no regrets, but I recognize not everyone will be so enthusiastic to pay $40 for a game that can be plowed through in just a few hours. No matter how I look at this game, there's nothing I can say is outright bad about it. It definitely does a few things that are questionable, but none of it comes across as bad. Despite its brief stay, it's full of charm. If you'll allow me the comparison, this feels a little like what would happen if Naughty Dog made a Sonic game. No, that doesn't count! Shame on you! While Naughty Dog's games are undoubtedly much longer, the linearity recalls memories of the Crash Bandicoot titles, and the stages often feel somewhat like something out of Uncharted, with simplistic gameplay tied to amazing set pieces. Admittedly, this might not appeal to everyone, and a lot of Sonic fans, myself included, kind of expected the game to be Sonic Generations 2. But Sega did say it wasn't Sonic Generations 2, and it wasn't. All I can say is, I greatly enjoyed the game, and while I do hope the next 3D outing has a bit more meat on its bones, I kinda hope the avatars keep making a comeback after this. I had so much more fun with them than I thought I would, and actually kinda became attached to my character. Much like with the Dragon Ball Xenoverse games, there's something irresistibly charming about teaming up with these well-known characters, being a part of their world, and fighting alongside of them. Oh crap, there's gonna be so much Rule 34 of this game. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening to me defend this new bite-sized Sonic game. If you want to hear more of my lovely voice combined with some Hedgehog footage, why not check out my Sonic Mania playthrough? Or if you want to see me review another game, why not check out my Is It Worth the Hate video on Devil May Cry 2?